everyone, and welcome to the Musical Innertube. I'm Don Rooney.
And I'm John Timpane. You know, Don's had quite a career in radio and television, where he's been an air personality, a news anchor, even a TV weatherman.
And John has been a college professor. He's written several books, and he's been an editor and features writer at the Philadelphia Inquirer newspaper.
We first teamed up for a radio show in college. On one show, we introduced a soothing musical interlude.
But we stumbled, and it came out Musical Innertube.
And that became the name for this podcast, where we talk with interesting people about their interesting lives, difference makers who really make a difference. The Musical Innertube welcomes the fabulous Hannah Solow to our podcast. Now, Hannah's main claim to fame is that I have known her since she was a widow baby. But seriously, Hannah is a very talented and extremely funny stand-up comic. A big presence on TikTok, Instagram, and anywhere that you get your comedy. And she's also a member of the National Touring Company of Oklahoma right this moment, now on the road, crisscrossing this great land of ours. Hannah is incredibly good as the vociferous Gertie in Oklahoma, and as an understudy, she has even played Addo Annie, one of the lead pieces, a few times. As you'll hear in a moment, it has been quite a tour. So welcome to the Musical Innertube, Hannah Solow.
Wow, what an introduction. That was so thrilling to hear about myself.
You didn't know those things.
I was like, wait, that's me? Oh, that's pretty good.
You're a busy person, Hannah, I tell you. And so thank you for sitting down with us to talk about this amazing experience you're having right now, sitting in New York City talking to us. But that is what you're doing right now, which is you're sitting in New York City talking to us. But there's a reason you're in New York City and not on the road with Oklahoma. Do you want to talk about it?
Sure, yeah. We're on a break right now. We actually were supposed to go to Tulsa, Oklahoma to do the show, and unfortunately they decided that it wasn't the right time for us to go to Tulsa, and we are supporting them and we are sending our love from afar, but we won't be doing the show there currently. But we're back on the road next week, and we'll be heading to Fort Worth, Texas with the show.
So you don't get to do Oklahoma in Oklahoma.
We did it once. We went to Oklahoma City and we did Oklahoma, and it was honestly very surreal. Everyone sort of immediately rose as if by some sort of supernatural hand, and they all started clapping. And it was like one of the weirdest, most exciting, strangest things that had ever happened. It was surreal to do Oklahoma in Oklahoma.
And it's the state song, correct? I mean, it's actually a thing.
It is, yes. Like truly people rose and like chanted along with us. It was wild.
So I imagine, at least the sense that I got when we first talked about this, is that things regarding guns are a little bit touchy right now in places like Texas or Oklahoma. And there is there is gunplay in, I don't think that's a big surprise to anybody who is interested in going to see the show, but there is a little gunplay in Oklahoma. I won't say what it is. And I can imagine was that the reason that they thought maybe not this time?
Yeah, I mean, I can't necessarily speak for them, but, there are guns within the show that we do warn people about them. It's not a surprise, like you said. And the show itself is a reimagining on the original Oklahoma. And people have really strong ideas about what the show should be, or, how it lives in their memory. A lot of people who all over, not necessarily just from Oklahoma, may have done it in high school, may have watched it as kids and show up thinking that's what they're going to see. And that's not what they're going to see. It's very different. It's much darker. And we're trying to wrestle with some of the themes that are in the show that are maybe more ignored in more traditional productions. So I think sometimes people have a hard time reconciling with the old version versus our version. And I, again, can't speak for the theater, but I think they just felt maybe it wasn't the right time. But there's actually an interesting article published online just about how, maybe this is the right time actually for the show to come, and maybe we should start looking at these darker themes. And Oklahoma does have a darker history and we're kind of ignoring it. But
that's a really interesting issue that in some ways especially the way you guys are doing Oklahoma. And I should tell our listeners that I actually saw you folks when you came through Philadelphia, and I thought we had a very hip crowd. Our crowd was pretty much into what was going on, and they really loved you guys and were down on it. I thought as an audience, but on the other hand, I mean, Philly is sort of like that, and and I think this Oklahoma is so interesting. I'd like to dwell for just a moment. So one of the main differences is that many people think of Oklahoma as a real quote unquote standard musical, right? And maybe they've never seen it on stage, but they've seen the movie, and they think, okay, big dance numbers, orchestra, that kind of thing. But you guys have transformed it. You want to talk a little bit about how it's transformed?
Sure, yeah. So like you were saying, people imagine like this huge lush orchestra. We have an amazing 9-piece band that sits on stage with us the entire time. And there's a mandolin player, a banjo player. So it's got that bluegrass feel. And it's honestly, they're gorgeous. They're all incredible musicians. And the orchestrations by Daniel Kluger are amazing. And people do love the music, but I think sometimes they're expecting, 30 musicians on stage, and we don't have that. I guess another sort of oft complaint is like, the women are wearing jeans, which
they never did that in the Wild West. No one wore jeans.
So that's sort of another unexpected, I guess, twist for some people, is that we're not wearing these like huge, enormous hoop skirts and
right.
Have parasols twirling around. We have amazing sort of like modern-esque Western cowboy costumes. There's still chaps, don't you worry. I still wear a little petticoat dress at one point. Still get that. But I guess overall, we haven't changed the script at all. The lines are all the same. We're just sort of like looking at these lines in a new way to sort of really bring out the meaning and really hear them for what they are. There's a few scenes that are in the dark, and part of that is intentionally so that the audience really actually listens to what they're saying. And specifically, Poor Judd is Dead is like a very well-known song from Oklahoma. And it's sort of like, just sort of glazed over that Curly, who's the lead character, is talking to Judd and basically saying, like, you should kill yourself. Let's talk about what your funeral would be like.
Right. And
that's done completely in the dark to really get the audience to say, wait a second, like, he's really telling him to kill himself. Like,
which he is. I mean.
Yeah, like, these are words that are kind of like, people sing through it, but it's an intense show, and sometimes people aren't really listening to the lyrics.
It's interesting about Rodgers and Hammerstein musicals, because they often have either a character or a theme that was quite edgy for the time, And Curly, if you think about it, yes, in the movie he's a swashbuckling, handsome guy. There's really no doubt who's going to win sort of the love interest in the movie, but really as written, it's if you think about what he does and the way he goes about it, it's a little bit harder to like him. If you actually, and I mean, how many heroes sit down with somebody and say, if I were you, I would just end it all right here. Right. In fact, let's imagine it together, shall we? I mean, so, and also the women in this Oklahoma are very self-actualizing, which I think is really interesting, and it opens up new spaces in the musical to look at that, how women were in the Wild West and what it was like to be courting or courted at that time. And also which is in Oklahoma, no doubt, is the historical sort of conflict between farmers who wanted to settle the land and till it and make a living on it, and cattle rustlers who wanted to ride through it and make a living through it on the land that way. So, will the land be open or closed? Will I own it? Will you own it? How will the country, grow? And it's full of conflict. And I think that's one of the things that your Oklahoma does a lot. I mean, when you first saw what they were going to do with it, did it challenge the ideas you had as an actor?
Definitely. I was able to see the show when it premiered at St. Anne's Warehouse in Brooklyn, and I had no association with the show. I just saw it because I love St. Anne's. I love the work that they do.
It's a great place to see a play. Yes.
Yes, amazing work that they're doing there, and they always have really sort of like up and coming and really interesting plays and writers. And so I saw the show there, and I was sort of like walking around Dumbo afterwards being like, what just happened? Like, oh my gosh, I wasn't expecting that at all. And then to come back to it, years later as a cast member was really fun and interesting, because it is that sort of like behind the scenes peak of like, oh my God, okay, wait, that's why that happened. And
yes.
Oh, okay, now I'm understanding more of the motivations behind it. Mm-hmm. And I haven't done musical theater in a while, just because, to be honest, I was sort of disillusioned with the art form, and I wasn't interested really in what I found to be unchallenging work, Yes. And so to come back to it in this way, I feel really lucky to be a part of this production. And obviously, I love musical theater. Sometimes I do want to just, sing loudly and dance on stage, but and no shade to any other shows out there. Everything serves its own purpose, but yeah. I'm very glad to be a part of a show that is challenging to me, especially coming out of the pandemic, of like, oh, this is actually something that I'm like working on, and every time we do it, I'm finding new things.
Yes. I mean, and by the way, you do a fair amount of singing and dancing too. I mean, there's plenty of those things in this Oklahoma. Yes. And you rock that petticoat. Let me tell you right now.
Hannah, when we look at recent shows on Broadway, like The Music Man and like Company, where they've adjusted things. Company did a gender switch, and Bobby became a girl. Yeah. And there are songs that are being left out of the new Hugh Jackman production of The Music Man that people or the lyrics have been adjusted, and people are getting a little upset about that. Do you think Broadway shows now are trying to adjust to current audiences and saying, hey, if you came for the good old freewheeling stuff, let's take a moment and look at what these things mean to audiences today?
I think they are trying. It's funny because I think I'm sort of on the extreme end of things, where I feel like maybe we aren't trying hard enough, and maybe The Music Man would disagree with me. I also have not seen The Music Man, so I can't really speak to it. But I'm sure they're doing an amazing job. I'm hesitant to say this publicly, but I guess my thing is like, if you're doing a revival of a show, why am I going to pay $300 to see something that I already know it's going to happen? I have seen it before. Like, I sort of do want this to be new and different and interesting. Mm-hmm. I think also, unfortunately, like, theater is not accessible as it should be to people of color, people of lower income levels, young people. I think Sure. We're definitely like at a point where things need to change in that way. And also the way to like keep theater interesting to those people as well is like, how are we going to show those people on stage as well? I feel like I'm sort of talking in circles, and also trying not to like have a pull quote that is suddenly on Broadway.com of like.
So, Hannah Solow is, quote, disillusioned with Broadway musical. No, but they won't do that to you. I don't think you're being too intelligent. Don's question is a really good one, because and what you just brought up, one of my favorite themes when I was when I was a theater critic for The Inquirer was, I kept saying, I think folks in their teens and 20s would love theater, would love musical theater, especially right now. I mean, and some music, some musicals such as Once have been huge hits, and Dear Evan Hansen, for a different reason, have been huge hits with the teen and 20 audience. I don't see anything really per se in live musical theater that wouldn't be fun, for even the hippest of the hip. You know what I mean? You're different because you're in it now. But don't you think that's sort of true, that there's nothing that bars, except for the ticket prices sometimes?
I think usually it is just the ticket price, to be honest. It's people saying, I have this X amount of money a week. I can't afford to spend $95 to see a show on Broadway. And I think back to when I was in college. I went to New York University. I'm very fortunate to be a part of their musical theater program. And when I was a freshman in college, we would show up to the box office like 30 minutes before the show started and get $25 tickets. I saw like 60 shows in my freshman year. And since then, I guess, 10 years later, inflation and, prices have gone up insane amounts, where I'm like, I really have to pick and choose what I'm seeing, as opposed to like, I'll see anything. I want to try and see and support what's out there. I will say, like, even with Oklahoma, the best audience engagement we've had is from like teens and kids. When we were in Providence, we met this mom who brought her son for his 8th birthday. And she was like, he loves it. He's been listening to the soundtrack. They drove 3 hours to come see it. And maybe, I will have to say that we do say children under 13 not recommended, but they made the choice, and I'm happy that they brought their 8-year-old. But
Sure.
We've had so many like wonderful young people be like, I'm studying theater and this is changed my views on what theater can be, which is awesome.
Oh, yeah.
Do you think that national tours like yours are helping to make theater more accessible, where you're not on Broadway with $700 tickets, but you can go to a local theater and see it for a lot less money?
Definitely. I mean, I think back even to when I was a kid, my parents and my grandma used to take me to LA all the time. I think I saw Cats at the Pantages Theater when I was like 4. I mean, and that's the reason why I'm doing what I do today, is because I, saw Damn Yankees with my dad, and that was my exposure to theater. And I was fortunate, to be in LA, but we have some cast members from all over the place. And like Hennessy Winkler, he plays Will Parker in the show. He's from Hawaii. And he talks a lot about how it was like just so thrilling for these shows to come to Hawaii. And that was like his access to Broadway.
We'll return to our podcast in just a moment. But first, here's a soothing musical Innertube.
Hannah Solow is a well-known, very, very funny stand-up comic writer, and Laugh Yourself Cracked presence on TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, and elsewhere.
Let's take a moment and let Hannah do her thing. Here is a heart-melting little ditty called Someone's Putting Cowboy Hats on Pigeons in Las Vegas, in which Hannah sings directly from a New York Times article.
Someone's putting cowboy hats on pigeons in Las Vegas. Nobody seems to know why. They say it's a rodeo, but the rodeo says it just ain't so. The police say they're not investigating at this time. The police say they're not investigating at this time. Merry Christmas, pigeons.
And here she is singing her surprising take on It's Raining Men.
It's raining men. Hallelujah, it's raining men. Every specimen. Tall, blonde, dark and liberal, and tough and strong and mean. Sweet, cute, tiny feet. Big ears, red hair, 63. Huge, angry, works for AT&T. Dresses like a Len. I said Len again. I am so sorry, you guys. Let's do it again. Let's do it again. Take 5. What can I say? It's 7? 17. Take 17. Oh, well, 18th's a charm, right?
Follow Hannah on Twitter at @hamstertalk, HAMSTERTALK, and on TikTok at @BabyMagoo. That's @BABYMCGOO. And now we return you to the musical Innertube. I'd really like to have you tell our listeners what it's like to do what you're doing. That is to be part of a national touring company. I'm wondering what your life is like. Can you sort of explain? I mean, 145 productions in, just thinking that doing anything 145 times, much less a 3.5-hour musical, it's astounding. And you've gotten to see America in a strange way. Talk about that.
Yeah, it's sort of a strange experience. Sometimes I sit on stage and I'm like, this is crazy that we're doing this. It's very interesting to travel the country, and we show up on a Monday and we load into the theater, and we have an amazing crew that sets everything up and gets us ready, and then we get there on Tuesday and we do a sound check, and we kind of look around and where are the stairs in this theater? How long is it going to take me to change my clothes and get back on stage? When we were in Philly, it was like, okay, here the dressing rooms are in another building, so we have to take a little longer. It's like all that timing and chaos. And then we have our first show Tuesday night, and the first show is always a little bit like, okay, what do I sound like in this theater? And what is the audience going to be like in this theater? And then we just keep going. And it's amazing to see different audiences' reactions and how that varies. And that is the good thing about doing it so often, is that I really do think as a perfectionist and as a, comedian as well, it's been helpful to sort of get those hours in, of like, okay, if I inflection on this word, they'll laugh a little harder, or like if I move at this point, then, they respond in that way. So that's been really fun and interesting to play with as well.
That brings up a question that I've heard other actors talk about when they talk about performing on stage. Actually, two parts of the question. Since you have a background in improv, actors say that performing the same role so often on stage doesn't get rote or boring. They instead find new nuances to the part that they didn't find before, and are able to kind of tweak it as they go along. So is that true? And number two, does your background in improv help you on that?
Yeah, I would say, I definitely strive to make sure it doesn't become rote and boring, because at that point it's boring for everyone, including the audience and everyone on stage. And the simplest way to explain acting is just acting is reacting. And so in order to react, you have to be fully in the moment. And that is improv as well. Improv is fully based on listening and responding. And I'd say my improv training has helped me immensely, especially because with this show, we are on stage for most of the first act. The entire cast is on stage. Even when we're not necessarily speaking, we're still engaged and listening. And that actually has been very helpful to remain present, because just watching my fellow actors on stage, seeing what they found that's new. Oh, tonight, something's feeling a little different. How can we play with that? And our director, Daniel Fish, has always encouraged us to really, be ourselves. Like, we're not necessarily separate from these characters. We are ourselves as these characters. And while being ourselves, that allows us to really be in the moment. And the audience, that is the best thing about live theater, is that the audience changes things, It was so funny the other night. There's a moment in the show where we have, I can spill a little secret. We have Bud Light cans on stage. They're actually seltzer. So no one, call the police. But we get a lot of people that are like, they drank so much beer. And there's a moment where the boys like open the cans all at the same time, and it makes this loud sound of the seltzers, and someone in the audience went, "Wow!" It just adds that little thrill of live theater. That's why we do it.
Do you see regional differences in the audiences? I'm just you don't have to name any names, or do you see? I don't know if there are parts of the country that react to one part of the show or in a different way. I'm just wondering if you've seen anything like that.
It's funny. Sorry to BroadwayWorld.com or the Broadway news sources, but we've had some really incredible audiences, and we've also had some of the worst audiences I've ever experienced in my life. And it's been interesting because I have to wonder, like, is it regional? Is it coming back from COVID, and people are so used to, and obviously COVID is still an issue, not to realize what's going on. But it's just, I just wonder if people have forgotten what it's like to be around other people, or what it's like to not be in front of your television. Just really, like, some cities, we've just had a lot of talking, a lot of movement getting up, and I'm fine with an audience reaction. I think it's important, and I would never want to stop anyone from even vocalizing. Like, we've had people in the audience who had vocal tics that I felt were supporting the show, but yeah, we've just had some audiences where it felt like they were actively disrespecting us, and like we weren't being treated as humans. Like they saw the fourth wall as a wall, and we weren't there. But I've loved traveling in the South, and I've had some amazing times there. But some of the more traditional people in those cities, I think, have had a hard time with the show, and are not afraid to be vocal about how they feel about it. And I feel like, we're not asking you to like the show. I don't care if you like the show, to be honest. And I understand why you might not like it. I guess all we're asking is for you to sort of lean in and wonder why you're feeling the way that you're feeling. Because if you're having an emotional response, be it anger or, laughter, when there's laughter after the gun violence in the show, I have to wonder why. And if your immediate response to a gunshot is laughter, like, you have to ask yourself why. Yeah, that's been strange. And
I think if I can just interject something here, a little story. After the Philadelphia show, we took you out, we walked all the way to next door and had a drink at the Irish pub next to the Forest Theater. And as we were sitting there, the people in the next table over started up a conversation with us about how much they loved the show and how intrigued they were with the treatment of the issue of guns on stage, and how it changed some of the characters. In fact, we were just talking about Curly, and I just thought that was so great. You must enjoy moments like that when people are thinking differently because of what you folks did on stage.
Absolutely. I think it's so important what we're doing, because, we have, if you go on the Facebook pages for some of these theaters, people are really upset. People are really upset by our show. And we've done our job, You're still thinking about this show weeks later. You're thinking about it enough that you have decided you need to post on Facebook. And that is part of what theater is. We have produced a reaction from you, and you don't like it, but the show got you to think about it. You're still thinking about the themes of the show. I think where I sort of draw the line is, just because you didn't like it doesn't mean that you need to convince everyone else to not like it,
Well, right.
But that's internet.
I mean, I think my impression from hearing you talk about your experiences, though, is that especially for you, I mean, this has sort of turned you into a stage veteran overnight. You've seen the whole thing. You've seen adulation. You've seen audiences that weren't into it. You've seen, that magic of theater where you really don't know what's going to happen tonight. No two performances are quite alike. You probably know that from the inside out. But this has taught you sort of the entire range of things.
Truly, yeah. I mean, we joke sometimes, what it would be like when we were in Chicago, Frozen was playing down the street from us, and we sort of laughed because they came to see our show, and we were thinking, like, what a strange experience to be switched, if we were doing the Frozen tour where they're dealing with like kids sort of singing along.
Hannah, let me ask you a question about that reaction. We've had reactions from plays and from stand-ups doing certain jokes. It seems everybody's sensitive about everything right now, and there's a lot of PC going around. So how do you deal with that as an actor, as a comedian, as somebody who puts that out there and immediately gets negative feedback, or within a few days, in the case of Facebook, negative feedback from the audiences you're trying to entertain or
It's definitely been a learning experience. I personally don't care. I know it sounds horrible, but it's been helpful in a way of just like, it really doesn't matter. I don't care how you feel about it. And, there's that sort of very funny Patti LuPone moment going around Twitter where someone refused to wear a mask in a talkback. And they said to her, "Oh, well, we pay your salary." And she's like, "Honey, you don't pay my salary." And that's sort of how I feel, is I'm like, I have no attachment to you, and I really owe you nothing. And you're choosing to come to this show, and we are doing our jobs in giving you this show. And that's kind of it, and if you're not participating in this like contract that we have agreed to by like listening and trying to engage with the show, then like I don't really need to deal with you anymore. I don't know if maybe that's a horrible thing to say, but I should also say that we have had like amazing audiences, and for the most part, it seems like people are really appreciating what we're doing. And I want to thank those people who are really trying to engage and who also are maybe going into it being like, I don't know how I feel, but I'm still gonna listen,
Those are the people you love.
Yes.
Those are the people, who are open to something different, and hit me with it. Let's see how it works, in my heart. Those are the people I just, as a musician, I just love folks like that, that I never heard anything like that, but I'll sit through it and see how it feels to me, I'm sure you do as an artist. Yeah.
And people that you wouldn't expect, like I've had friends come that aren't theater people that I meet up with after, and they're like, I don't quite understand the Dream Ballet, but I want to talk about it. And like, that's the best part of it, it's like, great, let's talk about it.
Yeah. After the Philly show, I believe a young lady with her mom got out of a black limousine or something. I'm trying to remember everything, but she got right out on the sidewalk with you and just started and saying how much we loved you. And I don't know, did they ask for an autograph? I can't remember all that, but you had a nice conversation with the girl and her mom.
Yeah. And like, that really warms my heart because that was me, like I was standing outside the stage door and, I went to see San Francisco. I mean, not San, I was in San Francisco and I saw Phantom of the Opera when I was like 10, and someone I didn't know in the cast was like, do you want to come backstage and see the costumes? And I was like, yeah. And they took me and my mom backstage and they showed me the chandelier and how it works. And like that, I still remember that, so it's nice to meet people after the show and to hear, even, like this one gal was like, would you sign my program? And I was like, yeah, sure. And she's like, you guys were great, but I hated the show. And I was like, okay, well.
Well, that's encouraging, I think.
We took my granddaughter to see a local high school production of Mary Poppins, and the students who were playing in it, as the crowd gathered before going in to see the show, the students were outside in their costumes, sort of milling with the crowd. And my granddaughter, who at the time was like maybe 7 or 8, looked at me and said, "There's Mary Poppins." Which was great. And she wanted to go over, and she did go over and talk to her. But this was not even a professional production. This was a high school kid who was probably more nervous than my granddaughter at this point. But that's the magic, I think, that the theater brings to people.
Yeah, it's very don't you think? I mean, once the lights go down, that magic sort of settles on everybody, where suddenly you're in a new place, a different, the willing suspension of disbelief kicks in, right? It's, where do you go next? Once you get back on the road?
We will be going to Fort Worth, Texas. Very exciting. I am a Texas fan. I purchased a cowboy hat last week. I've purchased cowboy boots. I'm sort of making my full transformation into cowgirl, influenced by the show.
Are you going to go to the Cowgirl Museum? Because it's in Fort Worth, and it is absolutely de rigueur. You must go there. It's such a great place.
That and the stockyards, I've been told I have to visit.
And the original red light district.
Oh, did not know that.
The very first one, in the place where all other red light districts take their name, except for the few green light districts, which I've never been to. Don, have you?
No, as a matter of fact, I haven't. I remember red light, green light with Engineer Bill when I was a kid.
Yes, Fort Worth is a great town. So you're going to be in Fort Worth next. Do you go to Dallas also, or just Fort Worth?
We were just in Dallas these past 2 weeks, and then we have a bit of a summer break, and then we do our big California run. So we'll be in San Francisco at the Golden Gate Theater for a month, and then we'll be in Los Angeles at the Amundsen for a month.
So you're going to go back to your routine as a comic and a comedy writer and all these other things that you do in New York City?
Yeah, I think so. It's so strange, because being on tour is really like sort of another life, really. And then I remember that I like live in New York and have a husband and a cat, and but I'm trying to do more comedy stuff on tour. It's been an interesting experience of like learning how creatively energized I feel. The show really kind of wipes me out. I thought, I'm going to be writing my pilot. I can edit my pilot during the day, and then I'll do the show at night. And it's like, Hannah, what were you thinking? No, I'm exhausted. I'm like, I don't have any ideas left inside of me. So it will be good to get back into the creative flow of writing and producing my own work. And then, who knows, like being back in the theater has really been wonderful. And I'd like to continue doing more theater. And
well, ladies and gentlemen, and folks looking for talent out there, the name is Hannah Solow. She is now in the National Touring Company of Oklahoma. She is stellar. And I think it's a really fine show. Not just good, but just really great. It's thought provoking. It's fun. You guys have a ton of fun in the show. You really do. I mean, the way you guys vault over the picnic tables is something to be seen. And you guys pop open those Bud Lights because of course they had those in the 1880s. So it's very it's really good. It's got a lot of energy and a lot of guts. And but also some of the best music you're ever going to hear, and you guys do such a great job on it. Very strong voices, including Hannah's. Boy, you have an instrument. I cannot believe it. So go out if you're in San Francisco or Los Angeles. Make sure you do see Oklahoma when it passes through. You will be glad you did. And thank you for coming on our show, Hannah Solow.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Musical Innertube.
Check out our website at musicalinnertube.com, where you'll find all our episodes, profiles of our guests, and lots of extras. You'll even be able to leave us a voicemail.
Our email address is musicalinnertube@gmail.com. And on Twitter, our handle is Innertube. Capitalize the M and the I.
The Innertube is available on Facebook, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Audible, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, SoundCloud, and iHeartRadio podcasts. Like us and give us a good review on any of those platforms.
And as always, thanks to virtual band Car Radio Dog for our theme music.